Greetings, everyone. I'm Kanika Radhakrishnan, and I'm delighted to moderate the panel discussion today on choosing to challenge global trailblazers. By way of introduction, I'm the program director of TiE Women Global. I'm also the governing board member and charter member of TiE Bangalore. I'm also the founder and CEO of Evergreen Valley Law Group, which is a full-service IP law firm based in the Silicon Valley in Bangalore, India. Today's panel discussion is co-hosted by TiE Women Global and EnDyna. TiE Women is an initiative of TiE Global and was started to foster women entrepreneurship around the world a year or so ago. In our debut year itself, we had over 26 global chapters participating in our flagship pitch competition. We mentored over 200 women entrepreneurs in phase 1 and directly impacted about 88 women entrepreneurs in phase 2. At the TiE Women Pitch Competition that culminated in Dubai in January of 2021, we gave away prize money worth $135,000 to our 3 superb women-led companies. We're clearly off to a fantastic start. And our partner in this endeavor is EnDyna. Established in 2016, EnDyna is India's first tech accelerator for women entrepreneurs. And over the past 5 years, 132 women entrepreneurs have been accelerated as part of 5 cohorts, and upwards of $500,000 have been dispersed as grants towards these winners. Moving on, let me do a quick round of introduction of our stellar panel that's with us tonight. Vani Kola is the founder and managing director of Kalari Capital, one of India's leading early stage venture capital firms. She's a proponent for India's digital opportunity to create next-gen large-scale companies which will scale globally. Vani's investment philosophy is shaped by the fact that she's herself been a super successful serial entrepreneur in the Silicon Valley. Vani has successfully led more than 30 investments at Kalari in different spaces like e-commerce, gaming, digital content, healthcare, and more. Some of her successes include Dream11, Myntra, CureFit, and Snapdeal. Over the last decade, Vani has become a very influential voice in the country's vibrant startup ecosystem. She's been profiled in numerous books and has been identified as one of Fortune India's most powerful women in business. She's also actively involved in supporting various organizations fostering entrepreneurship and women's leadership. Welcome, Vani.
Thank you.
Sure. Next, we have Akanksha Arora. Akanksha is an Indo-Canadian auditor and United Nations official. She's been an audit coordinator for the United Nations Development Program since 2017. In February of 2021, she announced her candidacy to challenge incumbent UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in the 2021 UN leadership selection. She is the first millennial candidate for this position and the first known candidate to challenge an incumbent. If selected, Akanksha would be the youngest ever and first female Secretary General. She was born in the Indian state of Haryana and is a global citizen who's lived in India, Saudi Arabia, and Canada. She did her administrative studies at York University in Toronto, and upon graduation, went on to join PricewaterhouseCoopers. She joined the UN in 2016, and while working at the UN, she also did her grad school from Columbia University, focusing on public administration. Welcome, Akanksha.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be with such esteemed guests and yourself and everyone joining. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Sure, thank you. I'll move on to Dharti Arvind Desai. Dharti is the co-chair of TiE Women Global and president of TiE New York. She's also the co-chair of TiE New York's Angel Program. She's an entrepreneur, advisor, board member, and investor with more than 23 years of versatile global experience spanning direct marketing, wines, printing, packaging, lifestyle industry, and not-for-profit organizations. Leveraging her extensive experience in innovative marketing and global leadership, her broad areas of expertise include deep data-driven analytics, marketing strategy, digital communications, and team building. Dharti is also an author, And she's invested through a syndicate focused on women and gender diverse founders called Plum Valley in New York. And through another venture firm called Bodhi Capital, she invests in early stage companies in the areas of fashion, fintech, hospitality, and health tech. Welcome, Dharti.
Thank you, Kanika. It's such a pleasure and a privilege to be here.
Sure. Moving on to Dr. Smita Siddhanti. Dr. Siddhanti is on the board of trustees of TiE. She's also the co-chair of TiE Women Global and the former president of TiE DC. Smita is also the president and founder of EnDyna Inc, an environmental and management consulting firm working with several US federal agencies. Smita started EnDyna following a successful 15-year career with leading government contracting companies. A nationally renowned expert in public health risk assessment and management, she has worked extensively with federal agencies. Smita is an author and also serves on the boards of the University of Pittsburgh, and she's on the advisory board of the Harvard University School of Business and Virginia Governor's Air Quality Board. Welcome, Smita, and we know you have a lot going on in your life right now. Okay. Moving on to Hemant. Hemant is the managing director at BRITSIF, that stands for BIL Ryerson Technologies Startup Incubator Foundation. He's also the MD and CEO of BSE Saman, CSR Limited, which is a fully owned subsidiary of the Bombay Stock Exchange Limited. After 26 years at Citi, Hemant decided to move on to giving up a job in product management, technology operations, and internal audit. Hemant decided to move on and pursue a more socially impactful role with BSE Saman. BSE Saman is aimed at helping companies do more effective CSR, corporate social responsibility. It is a logical next step in a journey to take on the risk of leveraging innovation and promoting social enterprises for multiplying social impact. He's a member of the working committee constituted by SEBI for setting up the social stock exchange in India. Hemant is at the helm of BSE's tech incubator / accelerator called Zone Startups India, and is actively leading several accelerator programs, including EnPoWer, India's first women-focused startup accelerator. Hemant is a proud graduate of IIT Madras and IIM Calcutta. Welcome, Hemant.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with 5 such inspirational women.
Thank you. And Hemant, TiE Women is a proud partner of EnPoWer, thanks to your stellar leadership. So folks, without much ado, while this month has been all about celebrating women, I think that this event is more about celebrating the indomitable spirit of womanhood and what we all stand for, always and forever, whether or not it's the International Women's Month. And who better to kick off the event than Vani? Vani, I would love to invite you first. You are a woman leader that has blazed trails across the globe and are an inspiration to millions. Can you please say a few words of inspiration on what it is that inspires you?
Thank you, first of all, for such a kind introduction. A lot of things inspire me, but personally and professionally. And but focusing on the professional, inspiration shifts from time to time as we evolve and as our own sense of purpose evolves and changes. And for me right now, of course, I made a very, how should I say, a strong decision to move back to India and focus on the startup ecosystem here and influencing that, developing that, growing that, working closely with entrepreneurs in India in their journey of building great global companies is motivating. It's my passion, and it is what I give most of my time to. So I could say that that inspires me. But, we are all defined by not one thing, but many things. But maybe we'll come to some of those aspects in the conversation, later. And I'm happy to share more thoughts on that, in a bit.
Wonderful. Thanks, Vani. And no better time to be in India to do that and inspire more people and get inspired as well, I think. Akanksha, as I was reading about you and your aspiration to be the UN Secretary General, first of all, hats off. You're all of 34 and aspiring for the plum job at the UN. I mean, that's no mean feat. But the first question that comes to mind is, what is it that motivates you to reach for the stars? What fuels your winning aspiration?
Once again, thank you so much for having me, and welcome to everyone. What inspires me is more than an inspiration. I think what fuels me is injustice happening and no one doing anything about it. So when I joined the UN, I joined as an employee and I was thrilled to just be part of the UN. For me, it was a castle on the hill, and I was like, wow, I have the privilege to work with the current Secretary General on his reforms. What an honor. But when I saw what goes on within the UN, for every dollar we receive, only 30 cents is used for the cause. Those we're supposed to help are being ignored. And that's when I think I realized that everyone within the UN universe is aware of it, but no one is doing anything. So I think for me, what fueled me, a normal person who comes from humble beginnings and really doesn't even have a father who's in politics or anything, what fueled me is, wait, no one is doing anything about it. So in that ability to stand up and fight for those whose voice is not being heard is what has always fueled me. And I think I look back in time, because I'm asked this question a lot, and I am an accidental or a leader by fate. Like, I wasn't planning to run for this position, and I'll tell more about it. But I look back in life and I realized that even when I was younger, I went to boarding school. I have always had a problem when wardens acted tough, like unnecessarily tough. So I think I always have the ability to stand up to authority and call out those who are not doing what they're supposed to do. So I think for me, it's just, that's what fuels me, injustice, and then not being afraid to stand up to authority.
Awesome. Thanks, Akanksha. Thanks, Vani, for that super inspiring kickoff to our panel discussion tonight. Reminds me of a quote from Maya Angelou: if you're always trying to be normal, you'll lose out on the opportunity to be amazing. And amazing both of you are. True global trailblazers and perfect panelists for choosing to challenge tonight. With this, I would like to open the floor for our panel discussion. And again, Vani, I would like to start off with you. Given your incredible leadership journey, both in the US and India, I'd love for you to share some leadership lessons you've learned along the way.
You know, more and more, I enjoy quiet leadership. What I mean by that is leadership is best measured on how you deal with situations and crises. And it's less about the talk, it's less about the statement in the lobby and so forth. And because I see so much crisis, I mean, of course, crisis of a different type than Akanksha is talking about, so it pales in the context of what she's talking about, but in a small microcosm of startups, right, and the world I deal with and live in. So to me, leadership is about, first of all, being decisive, right? There is no perfect data and there is no perfect right answer. And leadership is about being able to make that decision and not knowing fully how it's going to turn out, right? But if you don't, then who will? With that comes the need to take responsibility. So if you were right, then share credit generously. But if you are wrong, take responsibility for it. That to me leads to this notion of moral leadership. You know, oftentimes the ability to take complex constraints, right, and complex needs of different stakeholders, and finding that balance, by always taking the organization to the highest level of moral decisions, right? That really has to be the torch that a leader lights. And when you do that, then you can, to start with what you asked, then you can inspire people and you can move mountains. And without that inspiration of a leader who walks the talk and leads from the front. So to me, leadership is all about leading from the front and being able to truly measure yourself when there is a crisis.
Wow. I completely resonate with quiet leadership, and I think at TiE Women we talk about this often, and TiE Women epitomizes that. That's very well said,
It
Vani.
is because we are women. We value the value of quiet leadership. We do this at home. We do this everywhere all the time. So it's not the testosterone leadership. That's the only way. In the short term, it gets the claps. In the long term, there are a lot of dead bodies. So
True, well said.
Akanksha, you're clearly on the fast track, and the amount of support and popularity you've garnered in such a short amount of time speaks for itself. Do share some leadership lessons you've learned along the way.
So I so agree with what Vani said, and I think the quiet leadership is something that I associate with a lot. And I just want to set the stage in terms of different sectors that are in the world. You have private sector, you have startup, then you have government sector, and leadership in all of them is very different. So what Vani described is a leadership I have experienced working in the private sector. That is what we expect from our leaders, to take the blame when things don't go right, but to spread it when it does go right, and to empower people and stuff. But working at the UN, and I think just speaking about government organization, international, I would want to say what leadership here means is implementation for me. The decision in governmental organization, international, is made by a body in like Congress, or in our case, General Assembly, Security Council. So the leadership that's expected is to take the decision and to actually implement it, get it to the right people. And I think I'll give an example on the importance of that leadership. When COVID happened, a decision was passed, oh, we have to make a vaccine. Then the vaccine was made, but is that success? Not really. Success would be when a leader can come from any country or anywhere and take that vaccine and administer it to his entire population, his or her. So for me, leadership is about implementation, and that's very quiet. That's where there are no cameras. That's where no one will ever even know the struggles that went behind it and all the challenges of taking something from zero and making it one. So that is what leadership is to me. And in terms of what inspires, and I really think that if someone has the ability to realize that doing is leadership, that inspires a culture of action, of doing, of fulfillment for everyone who's on it. And just that North Pole of we're all in this for something bigger. So that's what is something that I've learned over my time in the public sector. But for private sector, I echo everything Vani said. I couldn't have said it better.
Absolutely. Quiet leadership and the ability to implement what we take on. That's really what business leaders are made of in general, but women entrepreneurs are particularly made of that metal. So with that, I'll focus our attention on women entrepreneurs, which is really the forum of discussion today. And Hemant, with that, let's talk about EnPoWer. This is the 6th edition of EnPoWer this year, if I'm not mistaken. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. So so we started EnPoWer 6 years ago as a key initiative at Zone Startups India. And our motto had, at that point, there was no separate focus being given to women tech entrepreneurs. And our mission was to bring them the resources that they needed to scale and grow. And we started small. We started with a cohort of 10 women startups. And every year we've been doing roughly 10. Last year, with the partnership with TiE Women, we actually had over 50 women startups in the cohort in India, right? And we, like I was saying earlier, we took those women to Dubai for a grand finale, where on a world stage, 14 out of the 50 from India got to participate, got to pitch in front of an international jury. And I'm very happy to announce that the top 2 prizes won by 2 of my girls from India, right? I think that goes a long way in telling you the quality of support, quality of mentorship, quality of resources that were provided to these women entrepreneurs. And there are several success stories from our past cohorts also. But I think the partnership with TiE Women is a very important partnership for us to help not only allow our women entrepreneurs to reach the resources in India, but actually reach a global stage where they get access to global investors, global mentors, global markets, right? So that's what EnDyna is about, Kanika.
Awesome. Thank you, Hemant. Talking about women entrepreneurs and a perspective on women entrepreneurs and how they are treated in general in the entrepreneurial community, Dharti, I want to shift my attention and my next question to you. In your leadership journey with the TiE and then TiE Women in particular, you would have seen a large number of women entrepreneurs. So what has been your experience? I want to hear from you. What is your perspective on, for instance, women founders? Do you have to treat them differently in terms of resilience, in terms of aggressiveness, in terms of their visionary capabilities? Are they any different from male founders? What has been your experience?
Wondering, Kanika, why that question specifically for me? I honestly come from the space that firmly believes that women don't necessarily need to be treated differently. I think special is important for sure, because we're all special in every way possible. Providing access to special resources or ecosystems, I think that's really more important, because I do believe that entrepreneurship is a journey which is full of, of course, wonderful things. You get to learn a lot. It's also about risk taking, right? It's also about your ability to take chances. And women definitely possess it, whether they possess it more than men do or less. I think it's driven a lot by personalities. It's driven by, your upbringing, how early on in life you were exposed to gender parity, what your personal stance on it is. When I look at my own journey as a female founder, I didn't have TiE back then. I wish I did. I didn't have the resources that these kind of ecosystems provide, whether it's TiE Women or even EnDyna. But I think I did manage to make opportunities for myself. It wasn't easy, but then entrepreneurship is not easy. So I think sometimes we handicap women who are very capable by treating them differently. So I think that difference should be more in when you come together, giving them that same amount of pressure that exists in the real world. And it exists for everybody, whether you're a man, woman, however you identify yourself, right? And so I think for me, I don't believe in, having a special treatment for myself. I've never felt more or less wherever I was. I always felt I was the best person for this job in this moment. And it's my duty to deliver to the best of my capability. And then leave the rest to, the journey and then the company you keep along the way. So I'm a big fan of ecosystems. And of course, that's why, I've chosen to be a part of TiE Women. And I just love it because it's so infectious to see how we learn from each other. I mean, today's panel, of course, is a great example. But even in, interacting with all these women entrepreneurs last year, what we pulled off, Kanika, Aparna, Smita, all of us in Dubai, Hemant, I mean, there was no, it was short of, it was a movement. It was huge. Everyone traveled safely, thank God. But you took chances. And to me, all the, that every single entrepreneur that flew from every part of the world, to me, is an entrepreneur. I'm not big on chasing unicorns and saying, oh, you're a woman entrepreneur, only 2% of VC funding goes to women-led companies. That's okay, but let's, celebrate the little things and create awareness around these, victories and these joys of people being able to do this. So I think, women, don't deserve anything different, special, yes, because we're special.
Well said, Dharti. Thank you. Smita, I'll move on to you. As co-chair of TiE Women, and based on your own experiences as an entrepreneur and now leading the TiE Women's initiative, what do you think are the specific challenges, Smita, that women entrepreneurs face, and how do you think these can be overcome?
So thanks first of all for organizing this wonderful panel and discussion. I was thinking, just listening to everybody, that there's a real tie here with leadership and cultural barriers and generational barriers, in ecosystems. So, and of course, the equality of, where women don't need special, a lot of places we go to TiE women and the chapters will say, we don't differentiate between that. So we are, men and women are the same. So I grew up, at least in a household where my dad, everybody said, and my mom was like, you're not a man, you're not a woman, you're a human. So I never knew I was a woman for the longest time, I must say, and I must be very exceptional. So I do say that it is a cultural thing to begin with, the challenge of being a woman entrepreneur. So as a culture, to me, India or Africa or America or Europe, women have always been very entrepreneurial from the get-go. They had no choice but to do it. So it's in their blood. But the society has not economically and advanced them in that fashion, or given them the importance of economics, right? Their entrepreneur's spirit. And when I look back, even my great-great-grandmother was a money lender, I heard, in a village. And so that's how they were, very entrepreneurial even then. So when I think about it now, that, the challenge is definitely cultural to some extent, in all the societies, in US or Europe or India or Africa, and all over. So there is that cultural barrier because the women are not from the get-go in all families. Maybe the top 10%, maybe 5%, 90% are not taught to be go-getters and take risk-taking propensity is low. So that has to be definitely a barrier that we all have to recognize in a way and work towards. And there's a whole host of things there. Things are changing culturally. I definitely think that men are getting 100% a lot more supportive than they used to be, seeing the economic benefits that they are getting back. So there's a definite change, and the change is inevitable. So that's one. The second thing, obviously, everybody knows about the funding issue. 3% is the most that we have seen from, and Vani, you can probably testify to that, how many women actually even come to get the funding and then actually get the funding. So it's 3% is the 2020 number. And that's low. That's very, very sad. And you ask yourself why. Even the most successful of women will say, we go to angel investors rather than VCs because there's a real culture in the VC world. And I'm talking of the Silicon Valley, and not even forget about places like Indore or places in smaller towns. So that needs to change as they see more and more women coming up and more funds that are set up. I think we have to do that. Funds set up for women entrepreneurship. So that's a challenge. The third thing that Dharti brought up was the ecosystem, the network challenge. The network is lacking, no question about it. TiE Women is trying to make that kind of network. We're doing all these things, all these events. They never existed when we were starting our own businesses, right? So that's just definitely an issue that networks have to be formed in every city, every state, everywhere where people can. And I work even with rural villages of India in rural entrepreneurship for the last 20 years. And I can tell you this, the network of women having a place to go has made such a difference to them. And they have started their own businesses and they're thriving in almost 5,000 village women that I work with. So we're talking about not even cities, but even in village, all sectors need that. Even in Washington, DC, we need this, right? So that's one. And the last thing I'd say is this girls in STEM is a definite issue. That challenge of science and technology, gearing women. India is doing a lot better in many ways than even US is doing in getting women into STEM. So I'd say leave it at that. There's that definitely, there's all these discussions can be by themselves, an hour long by themselves, but yeah, these are definitely the top ones that I see. So thanks for asking.
Thanks, Smita. Wonderful. Yeah, those are great perspectives on what kind of barriers exist and how they could be overcome. Now throw in the challenges of COVID and then we are in a completely different world. Vani, I would like to address my next question to you. We're still very much in the COVID era and not out of the woods yet. You'd agree that women have been the most impacted by the pandemic, and that has exacerbated the challenges that they already face. So, how do you think women can reclaim lost ground? What will be your advice to women entrepreneurs who are going through a real low phase right now and planning to quit the show?
I mean, don't quit. There is always crisis. Entrepreneurship is about crisis. Pandemic is one such, but we all face crisis. The good thing, at least, I mean, if I may say that word about pandemic, is if misery loves company, there are lots of people that are going through the same thing, right? The pandemic is not exclusive to the women. Yes, women have certain challenges, which I'll come to in a minute, but I think all entrepreneurs, men or women, I think this is a test of leadership. But there is a private crisis almost every company will go through at some point or the other. And so, again, it is about that journey of overcoming that and finding that self-belief and working towards making any setback be the ability for you to pivot or find that mentor or change that product or whatever it takes, right? So quitting is an option, and there are times when you should quit, but that's when you are truly done. As long as there is spirit left in you, fight, right? And that's really the ultimate journey of what you learn from entrepreneurship. So I think the pandemic itself, I don't think is impacted necessarily women entrepreneurs any worse, any better than other entrepreneurs, and I don't think it is specific to any geography. Now the challenge, of course, is women have always needed more support resources for them to be able to go out and achieve what they want to achieve, both at home and at work. And I have always, if there is one smart decision I made, and I look back to my late 20s and early 30s, was to make a choice that in order for me to achieve what I want to achieve, whatever is the friction that comes into my life, I will solve for that friction, and through creating the right support infrastructure for that, right? This notion of you can have it all. Yeah, you can have it all if you have the right support structures, right? So not that you can do it all, right? Having and doing are two separate things. So you can't do it all yourself, right? So now the COVID, of course, is that some support structures may have broken down, but you have to find and think of alternatives to how you can get that time, space, to be able to do what you have to do. But it's a problem. I think women largely than men. I won't say that that's always 100%, but if we are taking probabilities, women probably have to think a lot more and be more creative in, finding all that. Today I was in a call, and it was an important call, but the person I was having a call with, a man, obviously had his young daughter, a 2-year-old daughter, and it's can be distracting, but he was very comfortable with it and very happy that he has ability to include his life and his constraints into any professional setting. And I actually appreciate and admire that, but I also know that for most women, that is not an easy option, even today, right? So those are some, and it will be viewed differently. That's a fact, and unless we want to create a change in that, which will be a slow change, not a quick change, that will be judged differently for a man versus a woman. So those are some of the challenges of not so much the pandemic and the financial aspect, but the pandemic took away your your personal space and time and put more burden in terms of how you find that balance, but with lesser support resources.
Awesome. Talking about supporting structures, thanks, Vani. Dharti, how are platforms like TiE Women helping bolster the cause of women entrepreneurship, especially supporting the women entrepreneurs during these turbulent times?
I think something Vani said, really rings, very true. For us, for Thai women, misery loves company, right? The fact that the entire humankind is going through, what we're all going through, again, men or women, platforms like, Thai women definitely have touched on a nerve that there is a need for a safe space. There is a need for, that companionship, to hear each other and to help each other, to again handhold and find solutions. So I'm really, when we started this journey, we had no idea that this was going to be here today. I think all of us, right, that are part of Thai Women, and because TiE as an organization has been around for almost 30 years, and there are some very powerful women in TiE across, there are chapter presidents, there are women on the boards, etc. So, and a lot of chapters, we got that kind of pushback as well to say, we are fine. We don't need a Thai women special program. And we said, okay, no problem. We'd love to learn from you. How about you tell us how you do it? And then we bring it to other chapters who need this, chapters that are new or that are not that mature. So we were able to create this little ecosystem. And we said to ourselves in the first year, if we onboard 10 chapters, we're going to be really happy. We ended up with 26 chapters for year one. So clearly there was that big need that needed to be addressed, right? And for this year, we're looking at 35 and more, and I'd love to talk more about that. But I think, these are, the resources like, Vani was saying, and Hemant mentioned as well. If we can provide that space for women for every need in the journey and keep it very relevant and find a way to keep them engaged, I think then, you're just going to grow. And we want to grow slowly. We're not here, shouting numbers from the rooftops and saying, oh, we want to, impact so many women. We're happy with small numbers as long as the impact is visible. Somebody comes back and says, I want to continue in this program, even though I was in year one, I want to be in year two now. For example, the Dallas winner from last year's pitch competition who went to Dubai, saw so much that happened on the global stage, went back and decided to lead the chapter for Thai women for this year. And so she's paying forward. And this is the beautiful thing that ecosystems can create, which nothing else can do. And, so for me, that's, it's a huge celebration.
I think the running theme here is that there is a lot of emphasis on creating conducive startup ecosystems. And we need support from all relevant stakeholders, Thai Women as one, EnDyna, but we can't miss the piece of the government. So with that, I'll come to Smita. Smita, you first. How can the government incentivize women entrepreneurship? Is there something that the US government in particular, given your domain expertise there, is the government doing special incentivizing of women entrepreneurs? Are there any particular schemes? Is there a policy tweak needed somewhere?
Indeed, of course, a lot's going on in that area. I work in the government sector, so government consulting is a very big part of Washington, D.C.'s ecosystem. It's called the Beltway around the Washington, D.C., and it's all the companies that, and U.S. government is one of the largest buyers of largest buyer in the world, right, for every service. So what over time I've seen, and I've been in this business for 30 years, over time, there's been a real emphasis on moving towards, and a lot of lobbying has happened, a lot of effort has happened. And finally, we have all these set-asides for women contracts, for just women. So they're called women-owned small businesses, and they're WASP. They certify the WASP, it's 100% women-owned companies. They get their, finally they get their contracts. The way that, and then just so for those new audience, the way that whole India ecosystem, Indians came into being, let me just say, in the entire ecosystem of government consulting in the US, and not in the private sector, but for the government. They came because of something called an 8A, Section 8A, that happened in the government. And Section 8A was originally for minorities. They just started those who are minority companies. And Indians were not even a minority. You had to be like 1 million, at least in population, to be a minority. And when we first became 1 million, which was in 93 or something, 92, or maybe earlier than that. No, sorry, 85 or something, that 1985. And at that time, they started giving 8As to Indians, came into fray. And then from then on, it has just accelerated heavily. And now I can tell you that it's big dominance of large Indian companies, Indian-owned companies in DC, called the Beltway Bandits, and all over the place, as they call themselves. But it's truly amazing to see the growth. And as I know that when I entered TiE, a room 20 years back, there was not one woman. I mean, not like 2 women or 3 of us. And now I see a lot more of that. So things have increased. And I think government has definitely, the women-owned businesses have. So that's one policy. So it's similarly, I think there's a definite need, and there's a lot of talk right now about the whole financial inclusion and financial equity and financial literacy for women. That needs to be done very early stage and early, and funds set aside for startups for women. So there's a lot of talk, and especially in Biden administration, hopefully with Kamala Harris and many others coming into being. This is one of the biggest changes I'm going to see. And I think that even previous administration had some intent towards it, but this one is going to really make the implementation happen. So yes, there's definite need for policies towards that kind. And the last thing I'd say is this whole affordable family care, child care has been, and family policy has been a big emphasis. Even Ivanka Trump was talking about it, whether she was able to do anything or not. But there's definitely a lot more going on in that area. And since Mrs. Clinton's time, and she talked a lot when she was canvassing. So hopefully things are definitely moving in that direction. There's also paternity leave and family leave and family affordability for childcare. So there's all these elements: cultural, financial, technical, educational, all that stuff has to happen. And national strategy has to happen. I can tell you that Biden came in with the first sentence from his President Biden said that there's only two national emergencies. One is that the children are not going to school. So that's going to be a huge impact in the generation to come and workforce. And the second was women in workforce. He said the biggest crisis is women. We're not utilizing 50% of the population. So he has made a major priority. So I'm definitely engaged with Center for American Progress and many others to do that. So let's see where we go with that. Thanks.
Hemant, do you want to throw some light on how the Indian government is faring in terms of incentivizing women entrepreneurship?
Sure. So, before I go there, actually, I had a couple of observations on what's been talked about so far, right? And the two specific observations that I had, and I related to the fact that I think things are changing. So I'll give you one example from my own organization. We have a seed support fund through which we support early stage startups. And we've so far made 4 investments from that seed support fund. And these entrepreneurs are selected by an independent panel. It's not me or my management who selects them. And coincidentally, all 4 are women founders, right? All 4 startups that we have put in a total of $300,000 into have been founded by women. And this is not the EnDyna program. This is completely different, where men and women apply. The second is that there is a considerable amount of effort that is going in across the society, including the government, to not just address the women empowerment paradigm from an economic perspective, but like Smita also pointed out, from a social and cultural perspective, right? And there are several programs which try and be more inclusive, get the girl child into the school. There are specific government saving schemes that are addressed towards girl children, like the Sukanya scheme. So therefore, there is a lot of effort going on to empower women right from childhood and not just when they reach a stage where they can become entrepreneurs. Specifically coming to startup entrepreneurs, the government, so the nodal agency for startups in India, Kanika, as you know, is called Startup India, right? They are a government body where every startup gets registered, and they provide a network for startups for them to enable to access incubators, mentors, fund investors, etc. They have created a separate platform called the Women Entrepreneurship Platform, through which they enable women entrepreneurs to access resources that they need to scale and grow. And interestingly enough, this particular platform is actually based on 3 pillars. These 3 pillars, these are words in Hindi, are called Ichha Shakti, Gyan Shakti, and Karma Shakti. Essentially, Ichha Shakti means motivating women to take up entrepreneurship. Gyan Shakti means providing them the knowledge and resources to help them succeed in becoming entrepreneurs. And Karma Shakti means, going back to the point that Akanksha was making, giving them the resource to be able to implement their ideas, to set up their businesses and scale up businesses. So I think the government is really serious about getting women into the entrepreneurial system in India. Interestingly enough, we at Zone Startups also did a program with Startup India last year. During the pandemic, it was a virtual incubation program for women entrepreneurs. Because a physical incubator was shut, we actually did an online incubation program specifically focused on 19 startup founders, and it was a huge success. And Startup India was right with us from the beginning. Okay, so there is a definite push from the government side on supporting startups. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks, Hemant. Yeah, that's a beautiful perspective. Speaking of governments, the UN is clearly an intergovernmental organization that aims to maintain international peace and develop friendly relations among nations, achieve international cooperation, and be a center for harmonizing the actions of nations. And Akanksha, my next question to you is, in you, we have a very strong candidate who's out there to challenge the status quo. We would love to hear about what it is that you envision for the UN. What is your vision?
Thank you. So my vision for the UN is to basically be the best parent you can to everyone. And most people here are parents. So, you know, the 2 things that you want to give every child is roots, that's safety and security, and wings to expand. And in UN vision, what I mean by that is taking care of most vulnerable people, which in this case are refugees, displaced, or stateless people. They have no governments looking out for them because they're now refugees. They're out of their own. They're not voters in any country. And stateless people who have no state, or those who are displaced. And UN is the only organization in the entire world that can take care of them. Today, there are 85 million of those, and they have been in almost like a lockdown situation for more than a decade. So for me, that's my first priority, to address their basic humanitarian needs of food, clothing, shelter, security. And when they are there, to try to get them out of there as soon as possible. And that includes repatriation, which means, can we send them back to their country? And the way you can do that, if there was a conflict, is that conflict addressed? If there was a natural disaster, is the natural disaster resolved? The infrastructure is built back. If there was an abuse of human right, have we addressed that? Or we locally integrate them. And what I mean by local integration is they are given the opportunity to work. They're given the opportunity to start a life there where they are now, and not just live in camps surviving, or resettle in other countries. So that, for me, is the foundation of ending human suffering and humanitarian needs across the world. When it comes to development, so over the last 40 years, the UN and most international organizations have taken a Reaganomics approach to development, which is a trickle-down economics, to say you give money at the top and hope it would get to the bottom. And for that, in 1980, when Ethiopia had a famine, we were like, oh my God, let's give them all the cash they need. Then you killed markets. And then we're like, okay, let's give it to governments, but it didn't trickle down. Then we gave it to like American or Western institutions, big. It didn't trickle down. Then we gave it to local. So what I'm proposing is a model that gives wings to people, which is internet and education. So these are the greatest equalizers of 21st century. this is, if everyone is digitized, like India is a great example that has lifted people out of poverty just by mere digitalization. So that, and today only half of the world has access to internet. So for me, universal internet access, universal online platform for learning is critical for every person to achieve their potential at any age. And with half of the world having access to internet, we've landed on Mars and Moon. So with everyone having, we'll probably be living on Pluto. And then my third and most important is climate action. So we've talked about climate change all the time. Like, now there's in fact nothing to talk about. In 20 years, if we don't address it, we'll be under the sea. So for me, what's important is to do climate action. And that means investing in nature-based resources. Like for now, every dollar the UN gets, like I know it's 3 billion just within the system. Only 15 cents is used for nature-based solution, which will actually combat climate change. The rest is holding conferences, writing reports, and that needs to stop. So, and for me, what does investment in nature-based solution means? It means investing in entrepreneurs. It means giving giving money to people to do things differently. I woke up this morning and wore this dress. It came from the dry cleaners. And as much as I try to be mindful of the dry cleaners I use, it still had a plastic hanger. We need to give money back to them to do things differently, to impact climate in a positive way. Youth unemployment is an issue that impacts every country. That is a challenge, but I see it as a huge opportunity. UN can be potentially the largest employer for that population by giving them opportunities to get involved in meaningful ways. For example, we can create summer programs where they can actually go clean streets, clean seas, clean oceans, and that is a great experience for them, helps with the environment and empowers them. And that builds entrepreneurship at a young age. So that is my vision for the UN.
Wow, all your priorities are spot on, Akanksha, and we are all rooting for you here at TiE Women and beyond. Good luck to you. Vani, as we get to the close of this session almost, I'd love to hear from you if you have any words of advice for programs like TiE Women on how we could scale it. You heard about the impact we've created in year one, but what more can we do?
I think there are 2 or 3 things. Sometimes inspiration to believe that it's possible is the most important thing. As I talked about earlier, inspiration can move mountains. And so the first is, in your mind, you have to believe it is possible. So I think that's something you're already doing. And how do you do that more programmatically? How do you do that for a broader cross-section of women? I was just thinking, like when Smita was saying, she grew up in a home environment where she was a person. But, that's not the case all the time. And I did too. And I never really realized how lucky that was. And, glass ceiling, blah, 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 blah. I was like, yeah, and I think something that even Dharti mentioned, right? So, but over the years, as I've interacted with more women, I realize how much I myself am biased to assume that all women have the same advantages I did. Of course, I might have whatever the disadvantage is from a broader social access or lack thereof for women. But the first thing is your own sense of self-belief, right? And if that hasn't been given to you, then what can we as organizations do to support, right? So that's important, to provide role models, inspirations that come from different walks of life, and that makes it possible for some other person who sees them as similar to them, right? I can't be inspired by Elon Musk's life, not that I don't respect him, that's different, right? But I have to kind of see inspiration from someone that I feel has crossed that road that is similar to my road, and I can do it because they did it. So I think we can do a lot from TiE Women's Group to provide first and foremost that ingredient, right? Now, on the different side of the spectrum or pendulum is how do we create really women role models that, and what can we do to enable them to kind of reach the upper echelons, so to speak, right? So if you can do that for one, they'll do it for 10. So while we have to do this bigger sort of thing at the base, so I don't want us to be at the bottom of the pyramid or just at the tip of the pyramid, right? So how do we kind of address both? And that's what I can share as a thought.
Very
I
valuable.
actually have something to add here. Sorry.
I was going to come to you, Akanksha, but yes, please.
I think it's so inspiring to hear all of you, especially about the entrepreneurship. And I think just as someone who is starting this journey of a campaign that has never been done before, it's an entrepreneur journey in itself. And I think one suggestion I would probably just an observation I would say as someone who would now honestly expect all of you on the panel to receive a call from me to seek support. So that is coming your way. But I think just, one thing that inspires my generation is if we can have events where we're not just discussing victories, we're discussing failures, because everything ends up being a victory lap. This is what I did. This is how inspiring I am. But I just want to hear when you failed and how badly you failed. What was your rock bottom? Just so I can feel that, wow, you can get out of that. So just having conversation, coffee chats on celebrating failures, embracing them, and just making women like me be okay with it. Because we don't try, because we're so scared. The only role models I have are those who are successful. I need role models who have failed and have yet are shining and glowing. Because quite honestly, that upper echelon will always be a pyramid. But for us to get to the middle is if we can celebrate the failures and just be okay with it. Okay, I tried. So I think that's something to consider. It would open our ability to try a lot more if we can celebrate failures and embrace it.
I love that thought, Akanksha. That's just so beautiful and it's so profound. I have a 22-year-old, and I had a conversation with her day before yesterday, and she was saying, "Mom, I'm failing and it's horrible." And I said, just for a second, imagine if failure was a positive thing, that it was a compliment, that the fact that you failed, I want to celebrate that, And she just stopped talking for a second, and she said, and now you're saying it. I think this is so true, and something that I definitely want to take away from today is that we should be able to, whether it's a coffee chat or a conversation, we should be able to talk about where we failed and where it didn't work. But the fact that we tried and then we, rose from there, I think it's just beautiful, Akanksha. For me, that's the big takeaway for TiE women.
Also, Akanksha, there is no such thing as success without failure. I don't know anyone who has succeeded without having deep failures that they had to overcome. We may or may not talk about it and celebrate that, but there is definitely scars if you have been successful, many.
Scars or fractures.
Yeah, scars, fractures, uneven healings, whatever. But there is no success without having gone through that path. But we could just talk for another hour, Kanika, on this. Akanksha triggered something, but we'll give the floor back to you.
Thank you. In my mind, there is only success and there is learning. I really don't even think there is failure and that's an option. But Smita, Hemant, I want to hear from you. Any parting thoughts before we conclude the session?
I definitely echo one thing: no pain, no gain. That's just a motto of been my life. That's what I told my kids when they're growing up. And as Dharti just pointed out, I have a 32-year-old who just had a baby, who, after a very successful exit of a fintech that she did here in Silicon Valley, started her own company and went to YC last year. And then the basket fell off with the COVID. So she is just she and her partner were shocked, have pivoted, in an entirely different way of business, but it's still a shock, right? So I see that very personal journey of a very young to very successful young ladies. But what I did understand that Silicon Valley at least started the culture where failure was not considered bad, that if you failed, didn't matter. You keep failing 5 times and then you succeed the 6th time. The funding and the people around the ecosystem still encouraged the idea that you failed, but you tried. So I think that needs to be propagated all over the world, that, nobody, as my grandmother, and there's a Hindi saying, which I'll say, "Girte hain shah sawari maidaan jang mein, wo tifl kya gire jo ghutnon ke bal chale. So I always said that those who are riding a horse will have to be ready to fall, but those who crawl on the floor will never fall. So if you're a crawler or a rider, is a decision early in life one has to make. And I hope that culture encourages girls to ride than crawl. And we got to all work on it. It's a journey.
Beautiful.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Hemant, you have the last word.
So we talk about how women-led organizations are different. And we talk about how women as leaders are more creative, more collaborative, build better teams, are better at motivation, have a softer approach to management, etc., etc. To my mind, these are skills that are required to build organizations, not just professionally, but also personally, right? And women have been given these skills in greater abundance for a reason. And I think eventually the natural order of matriarchy will return. Women, I mean, Dharti put it very rightly. It's not about women giving something different to women. It's about the fact that women are special. Yeah. That's it from me, Kanika.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hemant. I couldn't have asked for a better note to conclude this panel discussion. TiE Women and EnDyna will continue our journey very proudly to lead and create more bold and impactful entrepreneurs. Thanks to our wonderful panelists. I'm sure your actions as leaders inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, as John Adams famously said. And that is the essence of your leadership. Thanks again, and thanks to our wonderful audience that joined today from across the globe. Thank you and see you soon.
Thank you.
Kanika, thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you for
Bye-bye.
wonderful.
Bye-bye.